It's a budget that's different than others, as I said in the beginning, because we're in a different place fiscally. And it builds on that foundation. And it ensures it doesn't have a pension crisis. No, it doesn't have that. The fiscal position of the city on the operating budget, we have taken, as you know, and I said in the speech, a little over $600 million of structural changes that make it our annual and recurring. And while we have done all that on pensions and on the operating budget, we have significantly increased our investments in our kids, in after-school, summer jobs, early childhood, healthcare, and other areas that I think, went from 21 million to 64 million. And we did it without any gimmicks, without any of the traditional, and I'm going to make sure, consistent with my speech to Civic Federation, we, as we did last year and this year, we will wean ourselves off of scoop and toss as a way to hide the true cost of government. And I probably would say on the fiscal side, rather than all the numbers and everything, the most significant thing was the admonition to myself, my cabinet, and the rest of the city council, we're not done. And just because the fiscal or pension crisis has receded, there's a difference between stable and secure. And we have our work cut out ahead of us. But that good work has given us the ability to make some key other investments that I think and meet the challenge for the city and invest in its future and its strength. So that's kind of at a level we can go over parts of it. I don't want to just repeat the speech. So we'll go through what you guys want to talk about. Okay?
Well, we all have questions. Let me start by just saying, back in August we wrote an editorial saying, giving you a lot of credit for making progress and getting us out of this, but at the same time pointing out that it's not completely solving the problem, that you have committed revenue sources for the 4 pension funds, for example, but there's still going to need to be more revenue down the road, probably after you're no longer in office. You want to talk about that?
Well, first of all, what, the no longer being in office or the pension?
Both.
I'm joking. All right, so let me, look, I've done 7 agreements. I'm not here 7 years, okay? When you look at police, fire, the laborers, and municipal, both twice, parks, and you also look at sergeants. The court made a decision about current employees and past. I did not create those benefit packages. I didn't negotiate them. But the court said you can't really touch them. So on a going forward basis, we fundamentally changed things. Dedicated revenue stream, which never existed, for all 4. Contribution increases by new employees. At least as it relates to laborers and municipal, the compounded COLA has been eliminated. And all the funds are on an actuarial funding mechanism rather than a formula, which means they have to be solvent. And on that 40-year arc. So that's for a going forward, all the sins that got us into this mess, there's an actual period at the end of the sentence, and a change going forward basis, which is why Fitch and S&P, not the only reason, but they've one of the fundamental reasons for the upgrade in outlook was because of the core changes done to the pensions. If the actuarial report comes back and requires additional help, now the funds, unlike the past, are required, and that makes a big difference. And they do have different revenues. I didn't think we should only put it on homeowners, but each of them are a reliable revenue source to step up for the future. And I think that is, I don't agree with the court decision. I'm clear, I don't think the court made the right decision, but it is the world I live in, so I have to address it if I'm going to fix the pension problem, which I committed to doing. And I said how I was going to do it in this room, both in 2011 when I was campaigning and in 2012 when I was campaigning. I've been consistent with it. Was honest with people before the election and then stayed with it after the election.
So where will you turn to keep on that 40-year arc after the ramp up on the water tax, for example, when you're 200 or so million short?
So a couple things. One, I think you should note that if you look at the revenue sources that are applied to the water or to the municipal fund, it's not just the water and utility tax. So there are corporate fund revenues, there's an enterprise fund share, and there's also property tax revenue. So we have a very diverse set of revenues that are designated for the muni fund. The second point that I don't think the mayor gets enough credit for is the fact that the city is agreeing to put all 4 funds on a 40-year arc. So not unlike any other municipality in the country, Chicago doesn't budget 6-7 years out. But what we have agreed to is to make it the law that the city contributions will be subject to actuarially determined contributions. And so the expectation, and I think part of the reason we're doing all the work that we're doing is so that future expenses can be part of the structure of our budget process as opposed to being extraordinary expenses. And so we anticipate that when we reach structural balance, that we will be able to anticipate all of our known expenses in the same way. And so whether or not the actual contribution due in 5 years is more or less than what we're showing today, we will have the tools and we will have the structural ability to address it.
And I'll also say, Fran, it's, like labor is municipal, and we'll go on. The new employees actually start to pay their actual amount equal to the benefit, and that's a fundamental difference. I mean, didn't create these problems, didn't create these agreements, didn't lay the seeds 20, 30 years ago that came home to roost here, but it's fundamentally different going forward, and that's what's put them on a firmer foundation.
Can you talk about the bag tax? A couple of years ago, the retailers wanted this. You said no. You said you want to charge for bag, go ahead, but I'm not doing it for you. Why are you doing it now?
Well, one, there was an environmental policy. We were paying a lot for landfill, et cetera. The goal was, we've introduced a policy that I thought would achieve that goal. It hasn't been achieved. Second, so I asked, this came through in a number of our aldermanic budget meetings. They made a recommendation. We then looked at Washington, D.C., Seattle, San Francisco, and New York. All have adopted somewhere between a nickel to a dime. All have achieved, D.C. probably the most dramatic, a 50% reduction in use of plastic bags, which is a good environmental policy. Often you have business and environmental groups that oppose each other on the policy. Both the retailers and Sierra Club support this policy. And so, my goal hasn't changed. The policy we adopted hasn't achieved the goal. So I didn't walk away from the goal. What I did is listen to the aldermen. They gave me a recommendation, and I included it.
What
If
about
on the
the
get-go
nickel
I
and
didn't.
diming of Chicagoans, though? There's people hate being nickel and dimed, and here they're literally going to be.
Yeah, but I think
nickel
that what I would say to you is it came from aldermen and recommend. I don't particularly want to nickel and dime anybody, but I would say to you is we also don't want to spend money, which comes out of the budget, for bigger expenses for landfill. So we're paying for this. The question is, how do we pay for it? And it actually has proven in other cities to alter people's behavior.
Is part of the motivation the revenue to the city? It's not a huge amount, but
You're not going to balance the budget. It's really if you said, why did I reconsider? Because I considered because I actually think this is a good environmental policy, consistent with closing the 2 coal plants that we're operating in the city, consistent with our other open lands policy on environment, consistent with other energy uses that we've done on even as a city into going into alternative energy, looking what we're doing on our buses on electric. We have a whole set of environmental landfills. Plastic bags are not a good environmental policy. It's not about revenue. It's about, I adopted a policy on plastic bags with the city council. It didn't address the problem adequately. In fact, it hasn't worked. So we haven't changed the policy. We changed how we achieve it, and we learned from aldermen and other cities that have adopted this.
Can somebody talk about the 2 fees, the loading zone thing and also the stadium thing? How's that going to work?
can I ask one last question?
I'm sorry.
Back? Just a quick question. Is this going to change your behavior with respect to bags, or do you already bring your own?
Amy, gotta be honest, so I don't do all the shopping, but based on what's in our house, I think we're very good as it relates to the bags that we bring.
You bring bags, your
Yes,
family.
Our family does, but can I, what's that?
And the loading zones and
Oh, I thought you wanted to ask
stadiums?
what kind of bags.
Well, what kind of bags?
It's getting very personal, okay? Amy would like me to go do more grocery shopping than I actually do, but let me, Well, you go ahead, because I would then say, answer this, but I want to make sure that we have the Inspector General in, that's all.
Yeah, well, I was gonna start by saying that, last year, the Inspector General, made some recommendations about loading zone reform. We started implementing those last year, which was changing it to an administrative process, cleaning up the backlog of billings. And one of the things that was noted was that our loading zones have been historically tied to the proprietor as opposed to the user. And so by converting through this managed pilot, our hope is to convert to user-paid loading zones so that the actual user of the loading zone will pay for the loading zone. We think that will cut down in congestion. We think that it will cut down, be easier to enforce and lead to better enforcement and optimize the street space and the curb space, increasing safety for everybody in the streets. We're recommending doing it as a pilot, so we're going to do it literally block by block to make sure that we address any issues with the execution. We're going to start in 3 wards, which is 42 and 27, so that's the Central Business District. And we're, as I said, we're going to do it block by block, and we're going to exclude or exempt any of the sensitive loading zones that are in front of sensitive areas. So in front of hospitals, in front of daycare centers, in front of schools, in front of hotels, actually. Our proposal is to exempt those because we know that we really want to focus on really the commercial loading and unloading, deliveries, things like that.
So my impression with loading.
So we're starting as a pilot. This was an idea that we worked with the affected Alderman, Alderman Tani. With the increased usage of our parking app, what tends to happen in Wrigley during game days is that people use the app. It's $2 to park at a meter. It can be as much as $100 to park in a lot. And so they park, and they park all day at the meters for $2. And so the unintended consequence of that is that the businesses around Wrigley aren't getting the benefit of the turnover. So we're going to start with a pilot. The rate is going to go from $2 during special events to $4 an hour, still a bargain if you can find the spot. And we're going to test it. We're going to see if there's a positive impact on the neighborhood, a positive impact on the business owners, and if it is a successful pilot, we will consider doing it in other kind of key areas in the city, like around Soldier Field, around the United Center.
But it doesn't sound like that, even that'll be a bargain, $4 an hour.
Right.
So is that going to be high enough?
That's what we're going to seek for
That's
price
the
discovery
pilot.
during the pilot.
The one thing, a side note, so if you look at all our budgets, I think collectively, I think we have 36, 37 IG recommendations that have been adopted as somehow rationalizing the loading zone. That's another example. So in past budgets, including this, a total of 37.
I didn't know
Some of the
that
aldermen
the
don't
AIGs
seem-
pushed this one. I didn't know that.
We get you the report. Not that exactly what we're doing, but reforms to the way the loading zone process. We started on that last year.
Yeah, his report that he issued was really focused on rationalize the loading zone process, not just the city council process, but also where we located them, how we structured them, whether or not the businesses owned them, or they were some sort of user pay setup. So we're taking this particular approach to try to address all the issues he raised
Right.
with basically use of the public way.
Some of the aldermen are doubting your ability to absorb the cost of the first half of these 970 officers and also keep pace with attrition without a tax increase. How are you doing that and not having some kind of a tax increase just for this purpose? It's a very big cost.
Well, you're right, it's not an insignificant cost, but it's also a critical investment. When the mayor and the superintendent started talking about strategies to deal with crime and violence in our neighborhoods and began to talk about the idea of needing to increase the number of officers that we had on the street, we started planning for that expense at that point in time. So it's actually been part of our budget planning process. It's been integrated into work that we've done to close the deficit. And we took the approach of instead of saying we're going to have this particular revenue source dedicated to pay for police officers and a revenue source that had the potential to go up and down over time and leave us short to pay for officers in the future. We took the approach of building it into the structure structure of the budget. So we know that that investment would be there next year. We can maintain that investment and increase it in 2018, and that we can continue to pay for it on a going forward basis, because it's actually part of the structure of the budget and part of our operations and how we plan on a going forward basis.
Well,
Too
where's
big-
the
too
money
big-
coming
too-
from? Can
it's-
you
No, no,
explain?
well, even S&P noted in their report, Fran, if you look at it, that we have the ability in the budget to put this in the budget as part of the structure. They even have that in the report. It's because of a lot of the changes we've made over the years. The other thing, you asked me, there was a second part of your question, so let me address that. If you don't know, I think you do, but we're also looking at creating a temporary facility to do additional police training, so that we can meet our needs of both increasing the force while staying current on attrition. I think this year we're doing 650 or 700 officers through our training facility, but to do everything we need to do, we're going to find a temporary place to have both the place on the west side, another facility as a temporary, while we search for a permanent additional police training facility.
You know, I
So
saw
that's
one
a
sort of-
different question. I mean, you had two questions, that's fine. One is how, and one is making sure that you're actually adding rather than running in place with attrition. And that additional capacity is going to allow us to do it.
But other than building it into the structure of the budget, you can't say I mean, can you say, if you had to explain to
Yeah.
a Joe Blow on the street, how are you paying for these police
I think it's
officers?
coming from a couple places. So remember, we had to solve for the structural deficit, we had to make the next down payment on scoop and toss, and we needed to find the resources that were necessary to pay for the investments in this year's budget. Not just the police, but also the mentoring programs, the expansion of after-school and summer jobs, all of that together. So we weren't, for 2017, just solving for the $137 million structural deficit. We were solving for all of that. We've got, as we have done every year, there's about $33 million worth of savings, reductions in costs across the city, from everything from, copiers to energy to, all those little bitty things that we work on every year in the budget. We have, fiscal changes that we've made, those aging revenue accounts or the zombie funds. We've done another sweep of those this year. We've been capturing, property value from expiring TIFs. We're doing that again. We do have another round of initiatives from the finance department to focus on debt collection, to make sure before we issue a business license or a building permit that we're capturing those. We also have an effort around enforcement for in downtown on weekends. And then in addition,
Parking.
primarily focused on parking. But then we also have some real growth in some of our revenue sources. We budget conservatively. We like to be on the right side of the revenue growth in the city. We're expecting a 3% growth in our sales tax the coming year. We've got some final decisions from the state on this whole issue of overpayment of PPRT, which has actually allowed us to take that number up by about $36 million. The clerk's also done a lot of work over the last couple of years on city stickers, year-round sticker, 2-year stickers, as well as encouraging people in getting a whole series of people who weren't in compliance before to be in compliance. And then you have what is essentially just $25 million worth of revenue enhancement. All of that together is about $282 million of reforms and revenue growth, and a small amount of new revenue that we've used to pay for not just the structural
And there's-
deficit, but the
Can I say
scoop
one
and
thing?
toss
There's
and
still
the
an
police
operating
officers.
deficit though, right? You've cut it according to your.
We cut it by 80%, the operating structural is 137 this year.
But this budget's still not completely balanced, right?
No, it's balanced. It is completely
So the
balanced.
operating deficit is not considered a.
No, so think about it different. There's a structural deficit, which is just the fact that the city's expenses have been far outstripping its revenues for some period of time, and that hole has been filled with one-time revenue sources. In 2011, it was filled with almost $600 million of just one-time money taken out of the Skyway and parking meter reserves. So we've done two things over the last 6 budgets. We've not only had to fill that hole, but we've also had to right-size our expenditures so that our expenditures and our revenues match. That's been an iterative process. Every year we make a little bit more progress. That's why, as the mayor said, the structural deficit's down by 80%. And this budget, we've actually closed that structural deficit for 2017. And I would expect, and the commitment has been, that the kind of core structural deficit the city's been facing, that mismatch between expenses and revenues, will be gone in the next couple of years.
And it's, again, everything we're doing consistent with 2 principles. One is I laid out what we're going to do strategy-wise not any bad habits. There's only one left of the 4 original sins, which is scoop and toss, or methodically. The structural deficit, as Alex said, I made a pledge. It's going to be eliminated by 2019. We're on that course and on that strategy. And each year, the structural deficit has gotten smaller and smaller. But I want to, this is not about just the fiscal well-being. It's about the economic well-being and job creation. You have to grow the economy. That is the ultimate goal. And so I say that because the fiscal thing was undermining all the other strengths. You have seen that job growth. You have seen that corporate expansion in the city of Chicago. You can see things that are happening in the city, whether it's down the river here to the post office, to McDonald's expanding, and moving from Oakbrook, or GE moving facilities out of Pennsylvania, world headquarters out of London. That is the ultimate goal. The fiscal piece is to fix the fiscal and the financial stewardship, but it is not the economic strategy of the city. And we have done it in a way without throwing the city into a recession. I mean, there were some people, when I first ran, said, just raise taxes. Others, just slash government, and there are different populations of the city affected differently by public government support. So, like in every other budget, this budget has $33.5 million worth of reforms and efficiencies and savings, and $25 million of revenue. Other budgets, that ratio has been more 50-50, but whatever it is, it has closed the structural financial hole that existed prior to my tenure, and done it in a way without throwing the economy into a recession, but actually giving people the confidence to grow either their businesses, expand their businesses, relocate their businesses, but ultimately create jobs. And Chicago.
Superintendent is, we want to make sure that he has all the resources that he needs during this transition period so that he can make a decision on how to manage overtime on a going forward basis, but we're not planning to phase it out in 2017.
But what is it now? What is it
Can I get
gonna
one
be?
thing? Can I say one thing?
It was
When-
116 last year.
When I say one thing, is when you said, well, Joe Blow on the street will say, how you gonna pay for it? Actually, Joe Blow doesn't say that. Since I'm out on the street, Joe Blow usually comes up and says, can I make sure some of those additional cops are in my neighborhood? That's what they're worried about. And that's what we're gonna make sure is that the additional resources get there. And as I want to underscore what Alex said, what S&P said, 3-4 months ago, I said to Superintendent Johnson, what is it you need? Then I said to Alex, and when our budget process starts, which is in the middle of the summer, this is my #1 priority. So every decision we made was to make sure that we could achieve that goal. And every decision along the way, well, I've also had other priorities, which is like in summer jobs and after school and mentoring. The budget was built around the additional resources for the police department to meet the safety challenges we have.
What will you end police overtime for 2016? What will you have so far? What will you have by the end of this year? Will it be higher than 116?
No, I don't think so. I think they're going to be pretty close to being on target to where they were last year, but we'll get you.
It'll be about the
exact
same.
number.
So
Yeah.
you're weaning them off of that with 76 million next year.
I am not taking the approach of weaning them off of anything at this particular point. I think, as the mayor said, the budget is built around the investments that we need for the police department. We started there and putting together the budget. We know that they're going to continue to need overtime over the course of the year, and that we're not going to, at this stage, have the police department choose between new hires and overtime expenditures.
So could
Mary-
you kind of break down the bodies that this budget will play
Sure.
for in terms of police officers?
Yeah.
Because, I don't know whether it's a new police
Yeah.
officers or promotions, or I'm not sure I
It's a
understand.
combination of all of the above. So let's set aside any vacancies that the police department has today. We're really talking about new positions that are going to be put in the budget. So for 2017, it's 250 new police officer positions, which they will be filling over the course of next year. It's 100 detectives. It's 92.
And they're being promoted, right?
Yes, they will be promoted, so that'll create 100 vacancies at the police officer level that we will need to fill. But it's 100 new detectives. It's not just, right, it's 100 on top of the detectives that we already have, okay? I want to make it clear that this is not attrition, this is actual new positions. 92 field training officers that are necessary to continue the training of police officers after they come out of the academy. We'll also have another 37 sergeants and another 50 lieutenants. And then in 18, we'll add another 100 detectives. We will add another 250 police officers. We'll add sergeants to get up to 112 sergeants total. And then there will be some additional positions. We've got evidence techs, about 16 of those, other things like that we're going to be adding as well. You are right that all of those, many of those will be promotions. And that will create ultimately police officer vacancies that we will need to fill. But net, over the 2-year period, the police department will be up 970 new positions.
Where will they go? Will they go to the neighborhoods of need, or will they go dispersed throughout the city?
I mean, that's Superintendent Johnson's call. I'm not going to do that. That's Superintendent, that's what you have a police department, police leadership.
You know, when this first came up was during the worst moments of the Laquan McDonald and the other police-involved shootings, and there are two issues. One is we don't have enough police officers, but really the other issue was maybe now because of all of this turmoil, they're laying back and they're not being as aggressive as they could be because they're afraid of being the next video, right? So when you were figuring out the numbers that you needed, was that a factor, the fact that I mean, would you have been asking for the same numbers 2 years ago before all this happened?
Well, that's, look, in 2013 and 2014, let's take that 2014 number, you had around 407 homicides. It was the lowest level since the mid-60s, 65. 2013 was also one of the lowest in decades. It was also the beginning part of the impact zones that have a kind of overwhelming force or saturation in kind of 20 areas that were the most concentration. So that worked. We're clearly facing something different. I'm not going to attribute it only to officers recoiling. There's other factors as it relates to guns and gangs, but clearly, as I said in my Malcolm X speech, and I want to repeat it because I believe it to be true, which is we're asking our officers to fight gangs and guns while we're simultaneously making some very fundamental changes to the approach of how they do policing. That has, and they also, and I said this to Fran on the other day when we did an interview, they're very sensitive to the debate around them. You saw it play out last week with how an officer responded while she was dealing with somebody what was supposed to be just a traffic accident, who was on drugs, what he was doing in her head. She's holding on to one side of the handcuff and knows that if she lets go, she could die. But if she grabs a gun, she could have a career room. That plays out in people's heads. Superintendent Johnson, I think, spoke to it. You don't need me to address it. But I also said in that interview, and what I believe is that this debate about the Ferguson effect is not a complete debate. There's a Ferguson effect on gang members. They know the narrative's different. They're acting differently in the same time that our police are. And so the resources are because
No,
of this.
how are they acting differently?
Well, because they know there's been a change in how police act. And so you could see it in different manifestations. And again, I will I'm going to not get ahead of Superintendent Johnson, but he could address that questions in here. And so I would say to you that given that this is different than how the impact zones and the type of strategy, not just impact zones, other things we did in 2013 and 14, we're facing something different today. Therefore, I asked the superintendent, what is it going to take? He made it not just numerical crest, he's working through some other types of things, dealing with the 1,300 to 1,500, I don't like to use the word career criminals, but people who are creating the overwhelming amount of violence in the city, and making sure that we have the resources, the detectives, the sergeants, the oversight, the training, the technology that all goes into an effective policing to deal with those gangs and guns.
So are you saying that the change is that officers are holding back more than they maybe should because of this concern about being the next video? Or are you saying that the change is because there is a better way of being a police officer on the street, which may also be slightly less aggressive in the traditional way, and that's the reality you're facing?
I know you like to pig it to one thing.
No.
Well, then.
Feel free to say both.
No, because I don't want to speak for all 9,500 officers. I
Sure.
can't do that, and I can't speak for how the TACT officers work, the gang unit officers work, the area officers work, versus your beat officer is the backbone of a department inside your communities. It'd be, I've said this even before anything happened, back when I was in Washington in October of 2015, that if we didn't start changing the narrative, it's going to have an impact on how some officers in a different world work their job. But I also believe that, at least in this city, the gangs are conscious that there's a change both in the police and also in the debate. I do believe they need better training. That's why we've changed the training for everything from how to see how to handle mental health, not as a criminal issue, but how to handle it in a different way. I believe in better training on how to go, which we just adopted, you saw, rather than how to command a situation from escalation. Maybe the strategy should also be, in your toolbox, de-escalation. That's been fundamentally different. The technology, you know, the officer will tell you, and her colleagues in 15, which is one of the first districts to get the body cam, they were all scared at first. That body camera today is their friend, and she now knows that. It was scary at first. It's now become not a foe, but a friend, because it's caught on camera and people could see that. But what I want to do is, and which is why both in Malcolm X, I've said it repeatedly about officers, and I said it today again, thanking them is more of a resource than every other resource I can put, or a city can put in. They have to earn that appreciation. It doesn't just come because you got a uniform, a badge, and a gun. But when it does happen, that appreciation, that sign, is so rewarding to them professionally for what they do. It goes a long way to keep them active and in the job they do.
Mayor, can you talk a little bit about having to give up the TIF money for schools and sacrifice Obama Prep, the school that you once called Obama Prep?
No, well, look, you saw in the budget, every year we have a surplus. We provide that surplus. This year we did about $175 million. But it also helped us achieve our goal. And that goal is to have, I think, a fair contract that represents the city's interest, represents our teachers. And I would also note, I rearranged our TIFs dating back in 2012, and the lion's share of the money goes in public investments, and the single biggest investment is in school capitalization. And I did it, and it just, what I would say to you, it's deferred but not permanent. And the reason is, look, the school district just saw a decline in students. We have a couple thousand students every year who are qualified academically to get into those schools. But we don't have, they're academically qualified, but we don't have the room, which is why I reversed the policy of tearing down old Jones, kept it up, expanded Jones. I have made an addition at Peyton. I have also looked at expanding, now we have the largest international baccalaureate program. But I believe those schools, and then ultimately that our parents have a choice whether they want an international baccalaureate, they want a selective enrollment, they want a Noble school, they want a military high school, they want a magnet school like von Steuben. All of them have gotten capitalization, and I believe my goal is quality. Your choice as a parent is find the right choice for your child.
So then why did
Could
you
you talk
sacrifice
about
that?
could you talk a little bit about your $64 million investment in children and what that $64 million is paying for?
I'm going to stay a little. I have worked for 5 years for one reporter to ask me that question. As the son of a pediatrician, I would like to tell you, I mean, there were 14,000 positions for summer jobs. This will go to not counting like support we get from Arnie Duncan, 28,000 on the city. I'm going to leave you with this sheet. We also, every year, have expanded our after-school program. But when you put it all in, meaning what I do at the Park District and everything else, we're up to 90,000 kids. But every year, around 1,000 more kids we add to it.
Go ahead.
No, we've done social impact bonds as it relates to early childhood and pre-K, full day. We have raised tobacco taxes to pay for eyeglasses and dental care for kids, and all those numbers. And since he's standing in the back, but I want to basically, from city year, homework help at the library, computer science, which is $1 million this year for making sure our teachers can do the computer code, and we're on schedule for 2018. Early childhood block grant, the child care Head Start programs, pre-K, mentoring, the dental program, eye program, the homeless youth, the after school, the youth violence reduction programs, and then the summer jobs. I came to office, when you look at those categories, some of them didn't even exist, like mentoring. 21 million. They're now at 64 million and 64.5 million.
Here.
So,
You don't
Give
have
her-
that?
No, she can't both papers.
Well,
so when you say the summer jobs program
Yeah.
for young men,
yeah.
what kind of jobs are you talking about?
Well, that's gonna be what we do throughout what we do with the 28,000, and it'll be those 2,000. Some of it will be working in the park district. It all depends. Kids have throughout the biggest employer is the city. Park district, libraries, our beaches, all types of activities. Some of them do beautification in neighborhoods, some of them do bike mechanic skills. But my goal was, and which is why, it's not just we're gonna have 2,000, they're just for these young men in band. They have to improve their grades, attendance, and not get in trouble. They will have, knowing absolutely if they do everything right that we're asking, the opportunity to get a job. Because, so you know, while I'm proud of the fact that we have 31,000 summer jobs, 65,000 kids apply for them. So I'm walling these off, these are just for those kids as a reward for good work.
Is he
Okay,
standing
I
up
was
because he's trying to tell
surprised
you?
I'm
to see-
leaving.
I was
I'm leaving. I have to
surprised.
stay on, where I gotta go to your friends and colleagues. Second.
Just want to make sure, Mark, do you have any question? Because
You don't think he cared?
That's no problem. I've sat here. What do you want?
we don't care about our colleagues
It looks
across.
to me like the teachers did themselves a favor by rejecting that deal back in January and holding out for another 9-10 months here. That they came away with a better deal than they had before.
Well, it depends how you look at it. I think we all came away with a good deal. That's what a good agreement and negotiations are.
What's good for you in this deal?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of good things. The financial picture of CPS is better, but more importantly, we've kept cuts away from the classroom. That's my number one goal. Now, my first teacher agreement, we got a full school day and a full school year. We got a new teacher evaluation system, never had been updated. We got a new principal evaluation. We maintained the principal's independence on hiring. Okay, this one did not reverse any of those. Number two. Number three, year one, year two, there's zero pay increase. Appropriate, there's then a 2% and a 2.5%. They make, for the first time in a decade, a greater contribution to healthcare. And for the first time since '83, they're participating in the security around their own pension. Each of those, and I would say if you look at the past, any contract you can go back to, there has never been a contract, any contract, not just for teachers, where in the city, where you've had one, let alone two, let alone back-to-back, no pay increases. You can look at it. And consistent with the laborers in the municipal fund, new hires will pay their full fair share of their pensions.
Are you backed off on the pension pickup?
No,
Okay.
our new hires pay it.
On new hires, but not on the
Well,
existing people.
labor, yes, but if you want to say that, then look at what the benefit in January was 0. Do you remember it? 2.7533. This is 0, 0,
Okay.
2, and
You
2.
said it was a fair in exchange then for that?
They said that that was a problem. I said, okay, so we worked the benefit structure to address their concern, but then to address our concern. Guys, when you negotiate, you listen to the other side, you hear what they have to say, and we now have an agreement, kids are in the classroom, and there's no cuts to the classroom. And in fact, I would argue, we've actually created security around our early childhood areas where because of the teacher aides, we made sure that it's not where we're seeing growth in early childhood, where we're seeing attendance increase, that there's teacher aides in there, so we make sure we can keep the classes and the teacher area protected. So I would say to you, my number one goal, given all the recent academic gains that have been made in the school system, was to protect the classroom. And also to make sure our teachers who were financially got the benefits, whether it was on salary or whether it was on the benefits. But if you look at the package, you say to January. I would also then say, Mark, look at all the priors that I inherited, and then look at this one compared to those, and I would say you may look at it, okay, versus January. I happen to see changes to the January deal, but I would say this is better for CPS's finances, which allowed us to balance the budget without affecting the classroom, where I've put an hour and 15 more minutes of every day's instruction, 10 days of more class time, expanded pre-K, allowed universal full-day kindergarten to every school, more choices for academics, and this budget rights the fiscal ship for CPS while protecting the academic ship that has been created in the first budget.
But does it appease Springfield?
Well, let me say the historic problems, well, you asked me about TIFs. The historic problem around Springfield was that they penalized districts with poor kids and they penalized Chicago because we pay for our pensions unlike anybody else. Now, 2/3 of the school districts around the state that get all the pensions paid for by the state have their teachers paying a fraction of the pension. We've now made a change. And so the real structural problems that we face is Springfield hasn't stepped up to public education, especially school districts with poor kids, and they have not stepped up as it related to teachers' pensions. If you look at what we're going to be submitting, laborers today are paying their full share for the pension. Municipal employees, new hires, paying full share for the pensions. Chicago public teachers' recent hires, as of this year, will pay their part of their pension. And I would ask you to look at another city across the state of Illinois, or even the state of Illinois, that has made changes for those pensions.
Could you have withstood another strike, and could the system have done that without a mass exit of parents?
Yeah, you know,
That was the goal, to protect the classroom, and we did it in a fair way.
you guys have any breakdown, a sheet like that, about where the TIF money's gonna come from?
She can do that, Alex. But I would, you guys will take a look at what we have.
I'm sorry, what?
And make a fair comparison, I'm sure.